Alaska, a land of icy wilderness where the silence of the snow-covered landscape hides secrets darker than anyone could imagine. In the heart of Anchorage, a man took the law into his own hands. His target? Convicted sex offenders. Our story begins with Jason Vukovich, a man haunted by his own childhood. Born in Anchorage, Jason's early life was marked by trauma, neglect, and a cycle of abuse that left him deeply scarred. His stepfather, a man who should have protected him, instead became his greatest tormentor. Jason Vukovich's upbringing was a dark, challenging journey marked by abuse and trauma that would later shape his life in complex and tragic ways. He was born in Anchorage, Alaska in 1975. His early years were initially filled with the hope of a loving family, but his life took a harrowing turn when his mother remarried a man named Larry Lee Fulton, a deeply abusive figure who became a permanent fixture in Jason's life. From a young age, Jason suffered at the hands of his stepfather, Larry, who was later revealed to be a convicted sex offender. The abuse Jason endured was both physical and psychological, affecting his sense of safety, trust, and self-worth. Despite the severity of the abuse, Jason's mother seemed either unaware or unable to protect him, leaving Jason feeling isolated and abandoned. His own home, which should have been a refuge, became a place of fear and betrayal. Larry often justified his abusive behavior under the guise of religious teachings, blending discipline with distorted religious ideologies. He would reportedly use the Bible to control and manipulate Jason, creating a confusing and emotionally torturous environment where love and punishment were entangled. This twisted form of abuse left Jason conflicted and deeply mistrustful of authority figures, as the person he was supposed to respect and obey was also the source of his suffering. The combination of isolation and repeated trauma created a deep well of anger and resentment within Jason. As he grew older, he felt increasingly marginalized, carrying an overwhelming sense of betrayal from both his mother, who failed to protect him, and from a society that seemed blind to the abuse he endured. This early experience of helplessness and rage against his abuser would later manifest in his desire for vengeance. Jason's attempts to seek help or find justice for the abuse were largely unsuccessful. The Alaskan legal and social systems didn't provide the support he needed, which intensified his distrust of the authorities. This sense of being let down by the system would later fuel his vigilante actions, as he felt he needed to take matters into his own hands.
By his teenage years, Jason's anger and resentment turned inward, manifesting in troubled behavior. He began to run into legal trouble, facing arrests and periods of incarceration. His distrust of society's institutions grew stronger as he saw them as both ineffective and hypocritical, willing to punish his minor crimes while seemingly ignoring the abuse he endured as a child. In adulthood, Jason's traumatic upbringing and festering anger would lead him down a dark path of vigilante justice, as he ultimately became what media would later call the Alaskan Avenger. His background is essential to understanding his actions. A painful journey from victim to someone who felt compelled to become the judge, jury, and enforcer in his pursuit of justice. After years of struggling with anger and feeling powerless, Jason decided he could no longer rely on the justice system. Inspired by a desire for vengeance, he began to plot a mission to hunt down those he believed were society's worst offenders. After years of living with the trauma of his past, Jason Vukovich's transformation into a vigilante began with a deliberate and calculated approach. Driven by a deep-seated desire for vengeance against those he viewed as the embodiment of his childhood abuser, he turned to the Anchorage Sex Offender Registry as his primary tool for identifying potential targets. Jason started by obtaining access to public records, which included the Sex Offender Registry maintained by the state of Alaska. This database listed individuals who had been convicted of sexual offenses, providing details about their crimes, locations, and the severity of their offenses. The accessibility of this information allowed Jason to delve deeply into the backgrounds of these offenders. He meticulously combed through the registry, looking for patterns and specific offenses that resonated with his own experiences. He focused on individuals who had committed crimes similar to those inflicted upon him as a child, particularly those who had abused minors or exhibited predatory behavior. Jason's understanding of what constituted an offender was shaped by his own pain, leading him to believe that certain behaviors warranted violent retribution. Jason took extensive notes on each offender, compiling personal profiles that included names, addresses, and details about their crimes. He spent hours researching their backgrounds, seeking out news articles, court documents, and any public records that could provide insight into their lives. This obsession with gathering information gave him a sense of control, something he felt was lacking during his abusive childhood. By now, Anchorage was on high alert. Neighbors began to form vigilante groups, fearing that the police were unable to protect them from this mysterious avenger. They started to keep watch over their streets at night, convinced that anyone with a dark past was at risk. The media sensationalized the story, painting Jason as a twisted hero, while also sparking debates over the ethics of vigilantism. As the weeks went by, Jason's violent spree left a scar on the community. While the men he targeted were not sympathetic figures, the reality of his actions caused an uproar. People were divided. Some viewed him as a hero taking matters into his own hands, while others feared the implications of a vigilante roaming the streets. The once peaceful neighborhoods of Anchorage now buzzed with tension and fear, as the line between justice and revenge grew increasingly blurred. As news of the attack spread, public opinion became divided. Some saw Jason as a hero, a man willing to do what others wouldn't, but others saw him as just another criminal, driven by a personal vendetta rather than justice. As news of Jason Vukovich's violent spree spread across Anchorage, social media exploded with reactions from locals, igniting a heated debate about the morality of vigilantism. The community found itself sharply divided. While some lauded Jason as a vigilante hero standing up for the oppressed, others condemned his actions as reckless and dangerous. Many residents felt that Jason was doing what the justice system failed to accomplish, protecting the community from predators. Supporters took to social media to express their admiration for his actions, often framing him as a modern-day Robin Hood. Conversely, others were horrified by Jason's actions, arguing that vigilantism undermines the legal system and sets a dangerous precedent. Critics expressed concern that his spree would lead to chaos and an increase in violence, prompting more innocent people to get hurt. By the time Jason took his first steps towards carrying out his vigilante mission, he was deeply entrenched in a mindset that painted him as a heroic figure fighting against injustice. His meticulous planning and research were not just tactical, but also psychological preparations for the dark path he had chosen to follow. In 2016, Jason Vukovich began a violent spree, tracking down men he believed deserved punishment. He arrived at their homes in the dead of night, bringing with him a notebook of their names and a hammer, his chosen tool of vengeance. On a cold winter night in Anchorage, Jason Vukovich set his plan into motion. Armed with a hammer and fueled by a deep-seated rage against the injustices he had suffered, he approached the home of his first target, a convicted sex offender named Stephen Miller. Miller had a history of abusing young girls, and for Jason, this made him a prime candidate for retribution. Jason parked his car several blocks away to avoid drawing attention. As he approached Miller's house, the darkness enveloped him, and the crunch of snow under his boots echoed in the stillness of the night. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through him. He could feel the weight of the hammer in his hand, a symbol of the vengeance he was about to unleash. Jason peered through the frosted windows, confirming that Miller was alone. With a quick glance around, he forced the door open, its hinges creaking in protest. The inside was dimly lit, the flickering of a television illuminating the living room. Miller, unsuspecting and relaxed, had no idea that his past was about to catch up with him. As Jason stepped inside, the initial shock on Miller's face quickly transformed into confusion, then fear. "Who are you?" Miller stammered, rising from his seat, his demeanor shifting as he realized the man before him wasn't a mere intruder, but an avenger. Without a word, Jason lunged forward, swinging the hammer with all his might. The hammer connected with a sickening thud against Miller's side, knocking the wind out of him. The initial impact was jarring, a brutal introduction to the violence that was about to unfold. As Miller crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath, Jason stood over him, a whirlwind of rage and adrenaline. "You'll never hurt anyone again," he hissed, his voice a low growl. Miller's eyes widened in sheer terror, recognizing the man as a harbinger of his doom. In that moment, Jason felt a twisted sense of power. He was no longer the helpless child, but the one wielding control. He struck Miller again and again, each blow fueled by years of pent-up anger and a desire for justice. The room echoed with the sounds of violence, the hammer hitting flesh, the muffled cries of pain, and the desperate attempts of Miller to crawl away, trying to escape the wrath of a man he never knew was coming for him. Once he had identified his targets, Jason created a map of their residences in Anchorage, pinpointing where each offender lived. He used this map to visualize his plans and strategize how to approach each individual's home. The meticulousness of this process was critical for him. It allowed him to feel prepared and calculated, rather than impulsive. With his research complete, Jason transitioned into the planning phase of his vigilante mission. This stage was characterized by careful preparation and an unwavering determination to carry out what he believed to be a necessary crusade against the evildoers in his community. Jason's weapon of choice was a hammer, a tool he felt symbolized the idea of construction, rebuilding his sense of justice through destruction of those he deemed unworthy. He purchased a sturdy hammer from a local hardware store, treating it as an instrument of justice rather than a weapon. He believed that by wielding it, he was reclaiming power that had been stripped away from him during his childhood. Jason spent time mentally preparing for his actions, often reflecting on his own traumatic experiences to fuel his resolve. He rehearsed what he would say to his targets, imagining their reactions and his own emotional responses during the confrontations. This psychological preparation was essential for him, as he grappled with feelings of anger, justification, and the moral implications of his actions. To ensure a systematic approach, Jason developed a timeline for his attacks. He scheduled visits based on when he believed the offenders would be most vulnerable, often choosing late night or early morning hours when he thought they would be alone at home. This planning added a layer of strategic thinking to his actions, reinforcing his view of himself as a crusader rather than a common criminal. In the days leading up to his first attack, Jason practiced the logistics of his approach, visualizing the path he would take to each offender's home. He mentally mapped out escape routes and anticipated possible complications, such as encountering neighbors or police. This attention to detail underscored his need for control, something he had long craved but felt deprived of throughout his life. Throughout this planning stage, Jason continued to rationalize his behavior. He convinced himself that he was acting not just out of personal vengeance, but as a form of societal justice. He believed he was protecting future victims from the predators he targeted, framing his mission as a necessary evil for the greater good. This internal justification served to diminish his fears and anxieties about the violence he was about to unleash. The stark divide in public opinion became a focal point of local news and social media discussions. While some rallied behind Jason, believing he was ridding society of dangerous individuals, others feared the implications of allowing vigilante justice to take root. Discussions around morality, justice, and the effectiveness of the legal system filled comment sections and local forums, highlighting the complexity of human emotions in the face of crime and retribution. The phenomenon of vigilante justice often captivates the public's imagination, particularly in times of perceived societal failure or ineffectiveness of the legal system. Jason Vukovich's story exemplifies the larger narrative of distrust in justice institutions, providing a lens through which society examines its values and moral boundaries. In a world where many feel powerless against crime and injustice, the figure of the vigilante becomes appealing. Individuals like Jason embody the idea that one can take matters into their own hands, offering a sense of empowerment in situations where traditional justice fails. This sense of agency is particularly strong in cases involving sex offenders, as many believe they are beyond redemption and should face immediate consequences for their actions. Media portrayals of vigilantes often glamorize their actions, presenting them as heroic figures fighting against evil. Stories like Jason's resonate with audiences who crave narratives of justice that are swift and uncompromising. The romanticized view of vigilantes taps into deep-seated frustrations with the legal system, which is often seen as slow, bureaucratic, and sometimes lenient toward offenders. Jason's story fits into a broader societal narrative characterized by distrust in authorities and institutions. When people feel that their safety is compromised and that the justice system is inadequate, they may turn to figures like Jason for a sense of hope and resolution. This cycle can lead to an environment where vigilante justice is not only accepted but celebrated, further complicating the conversation around crime and punishment. In conclusion, Jason Vukovich's actions ignited a passionate discourse in Anchorage, revealing the complexities of justice, morality, societal expectations. As the lines blurred between heroism and criminality, the community was left to grapple with the uncomfortable truths about vengeance, justice, and the human condition. It wasn't long before Jason's trail of violence caught up with him. After his final attack, police tracked him down and arrested him. But Jason showed no remorse, instead justifying his actions as justice for those who had been wronged. Ultimately, the judge imposed a harsh sentence. Jason Vukovich was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his actions. The court emphasized that while it recognized his past trauma, the violent and calculated nature of his attacks could not be overlooked. The judge stated, "Vigilantism has no place in our society. While your intentions may have been rooted in a desire for justice, the means by which you pursued that justice have created further victims and perpetuated a cycle of violence." As Jason was led away in handcuffs, he maintained a defiant demeanor, still believing that he had done the right thing. His conviction would mark the beginning of a long prison sentence, during which he would have to confront not only the consequences of his actions, but also the psychological impact of his past. The case would serve as a lasting reminder of the complexities surrounding vigilante justice and the fine line between heroism and criminality. Jason Vukovich's story remains one of the most complex cases of vigilantism in recent history. Did he bring justice, or did he let his trauma define him? For some, he's a hero. For others, he's just another criminal who brought chaos into an already fragile world. Today, Jason Vukovich sits behind bars, remembered by some as the Alaskan Avenger. His story raises questions about justice, trauma, and where the line between hero and criminal really lies. In the end, his tale serves as a reminder that even those who seek justice can fall victim to the darkness they're trying to fight. As we conclude the unsettling story of Jason Vukovich, we're left with important questions about justice and morality. Jason's actions reveal the struggle between a desire for protection and the consequences of violence. While he sought to avenge his trauma and protect others, his violent spree raised serious ethical concerns about vigilantism and its impact on the community. What does justice truly mean? Is it defined by the law or by our moral beliefs? This case challenges us to reflect on the lengths we might go to seek justice and the implications of those actions. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you sympathize with Jason's motives, or do you believe he crossed an unforgivable line? Justice exists in shades of gray, and it's essential to explore these themes together. Thank you for watching, and we hope you'll join us again as we dive into more stories that challenge our perceptions of justice and morality.